Wellness Warriors. Welcome back to the Burnout Resolution Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mylaine Riobe, and today we're diving deep into sleep and discussing why sleep is a superpower and lack of sleep is extremely dangerous. Sleep deprivation is a mounting health concern for Gen Z and millennials, and younger generations are becoming more and more impacted by an inability to get proper sleep. Not because they're not trying, but because the culture that we live in does not prioritize sleep, doesn't prioritize rest. And so Gen Z and millennials are caught in this whirlpool of go, go, go all day. And there are no built-in times for them to rest. Many of them are working more than 40 hours a week. And so by the time they get home, they wind down and they take care of all the things they need to do at home. They're finding themselves pushed up against the wall and barely getting enough sleep before they have to get up and do it all over again. And to add insult to injury, many of them struggle to fall asleep or stay asleep or both. So in today's episode, we're going to dive deep into why sleep is important and what you can do to make sure that you get the right amount of sleep for you. Sleep is personal. How much sleep you need depends on a lot of factors. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution for sleep. Generally speaking, women need more sleep than men. So if you're a biological woman, you actually need an extra hour of sleep when you compare yourself to a biological male. And if you know your dynamic metabolic type, if you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type, you need even more sleep because you need more time to restore. So when we sleep, it's not like we're turning the body off, like we're powering down our phones at night or powering down our computers, and they're not really doing anything until we turn them back on. Sleep is a natural body function. There is so much going on while you sleep. So your body is still technically awake, even though you're not aware that it's awake and it's laying flat. There's so many body functions that go on, from restoring our cellular functions, repairing our cells, mobilizing toxins and inflammation to leave the body through urination and bowel movements the following day, repairing damaged genes and DNA. Balancing of hormones occurs while we sleep, and so much more. So sleep deprivation, if you're cutting into those times when you need to be asleep, those functions are not occurring. In fact, even the microbiome is sensitive to how much sleep we get. So sleep deprivation actually causes an imbalance in our microbiome, which are the good bacteria that live in our colons that we absolutely must have to function. So the microbiome, although we don't know exactly what percentage of our body function they control, it's becoming increasingly apparent that they control a huge chunk of our body function. In fact, it's not a stretch to think that the microbiome is going to be considered an organ of the body, just like our heart and lungs are an organ. It's just a matter of time before the microbiome is recognized as an organ that we absolutely must have functioning properly for our own well-being. So when we don't get enough sleep, or if our sleep is interrupted for any reason, the microbiome gets disturbed. When the microbiome gets disturbed, our immune system gets disturbed. Of course, when our sleep gets disturbed, that's a stress, right? And all of the previous podcasts we've done on stress and all the negative potential impacts of stress on body function. So you can kind of see how not getting enough sleep can just snowball into all kinds of havoc, not just being tired, but increasing the risk of diseases. And in fact, after breathing and drinking water, sleep is actually the third most important thing that we consciously do. It's even more important than eating. So we're going to talk about, what do you do if you don't have time to sleep? What do you do if you can't fall asleep or stay asleep? So we're going to talk about some tips and tricks that you can start right away that are science-backed and shown to be extremely effective for optimizing sleep. So again, when you close your eyes and you actually fall asleep, your body is still working. It's like a 7-Eleven, it just never closes. So it goes into specific functions that it needs to do. And so there's a certain arm of your nervous system that gets turned on, so to speak, when we're sleeping. So we're more in what we call parasympathetic tone, or that calm tone of our nervous system, where there's more blood flow, there's more calm in the body. Clearly, if your parasympathetic system is not fully active and your sympathetic system or your fight or flight system is more active, you're going to get up more. You're going to have a harder time falling asleep. So sleep is a parasympathetic function. It's a anti-fight or flight function, so to speak. So getting yourself into that tone before you go to sleep, before you actually lay your head on the pillow. So getting into that parasympathetic state of mind is actually really important to get good sleep. Sleep is also nature's antidepressant. So when we get proper sleep, we're making really critical neurotransmitters that regulate our mood. We're balancing our hormones in such a way that our mood is stable and elevated. When we're stressed out, when there's too much cortisol in our system, that dysregulates a very important neurotransmitter called serotonin. Serotonin has its tentacles in just about any body function we can think of. It's not just for mood, it's actually for a lot of other things and for our general well-being. And so sleep deprivation causes us not to regulate our serotonin properly, which then disrupts all kinds of other body functions, including our mood. So a lot of depression is actually sleep deprivation and the fatigue and burnout that results from that. Or whether the sleep deprivation is simply because there's too much going on and you literally don't have enough hours in the day to get the right amount of sleep, or whether you do have the amount of time, but you're busy with mind racing when you're trying to go to sleep, or you're busy waking up too often or going to the bathroom or whatever it might be that's waking you. We also make our memories, we consolidate our memories while we sleep. So a lot of attention deficit, inability to focus, so to speak, can come about from lack of sleep or, again, interrupted sleep. And if we're not focused, we can't really consolidate those memories. And so sleep deprivation increases the risk of dementia as well. And for even younger people, it's not just dementia when you're older, but ADHD when you're younger. And in fact, probably many, many other diseases can be explained through the mechanism of sleep deprivation because it's such an essential body function. And of course, when we look at longevity, anti-aging, sleep is really important. You can't out Botox of sleep. There aren't enough skin lotions and anti-aging creams to make up for lack of sleep. So anti-aging or longevity is an inside-out job, right? You're going to manifest on the outside what's going on the inside. And if what is going on the inside is sleep deprivation and your body being a bit of a chaotic state because it's not able to perform the functions that are so essential at night to restore itself, to remove toxins, it makes a lot of sense that would cause rapid aging, right? Or burnout, and make it a lot harder for you to look youthful. Because if your skin cells are not able to remove toxins, if your skin cells are not able to recover and be repaired, then the aging will show on your skin. And if it's showing on your skin, that means it's showing on the inside, even though we can't see that, right? And so we get damage, what we call oxidative stress damage, from the body not having enough time to simply rest and perform those critical functions that we need to be in a resting state for it to perform. So if you're looking for some anti-aging tips, how to have your skin look clearer, how to have more energy to train for that marathon or whatever that fitness goal is, or even to lose weight, sleep deprivation increases the risk of weight gain. So if you're looking to lose weight, if you're looking to normalize weight, if you're looking to maintain normal weight, sleep is a really critical function of that. If you're looking to have a better mood, to potentially get off of antidepressants, again, under the guidance of your physician, you don't really want to ever do that on your own. But if that's a goal, right? If the goal is, hey, I'd really like to work on some things and look at the root causes of why I'm not feeling well and requiring an antidepressant, so that at some point I can start to wean myself off under the guidance of my psychiatrist and my therapist, then making sure you're working on your sleep is going to be a major, major part of that goal. And again, job performance, if you're a professional, if you're a business owner, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a creative, whatever you're doing throughout the day, if you don't get enough sleep, you're not going to be as efficient and creative and able to do those things during the day. So job performance, the success of your business, the goals, your professional goals that you have that you want to reach, your fitness goals, your well-being goals, your wellness goals, they all depend on the quality of your sleep. Among other things, obviously it's not the only thing, right? Got to eat well and move and do all the things that come in with the sleep and allow the entire body to function optimally. But if you're not sleeping well, none of the other things can actually happen properly. So the body is very interdependent, right? It needs the proper nutrition, it needs the proper movement, it needs to have detoxification happening, it needs to have enough time to rest and recover. It's like a well-tuned orchestra, right? Every instrument matters. If one or two instruments are off key, then obviously the song doesn't sound the same, right? And so it's the same in the body. But there are certain functions that are critical, right? So eating is one of them. Movement is another. Making sure the body is ridding itself of toxins is another. And of course, sleep is another. And I always put hydration under the eat pillar, right? Making sure you're drinking enough water. All of that is critical. And if any one of those things is absent or not functioning properly, it will be like a domino effect and affect all the other ones. And so sleep is just one of those foundational things that you can't ignore. And even hormone balance, we talked about that, right? So your hormones are actually balanced while you sleep at night. And so a lot of gynecological issues and even some fertility issues, both men and women, some of that is derived from lack of sleep. Lack of sleep is obviously a stressor, right? So it produces more cortisol. So your body's like, why am I not resting? What's happening? Something must be wrong. And it goes into that sympathetic tone, that fight or flight tone, instead of staying in the parasympathetic tone. And so it's a stress, right? Your body doesn't understand that, no, I'm not being chased by a lion or a tiger. I'm just not sleeping well. Like it's not going to necessarily be able to parse that out because the chemicals it's going to start dumping into itself are the same, regardless of the reason for the stress or the type of stress. So you're going to have more cortisol getting dumped into the body, and the body is going to get hijacked into a fight or flight mode. And that's going to be like a vicious circle that's going to erode the quality of your sleep even more. So you kind of get stuck in a loop where you have to break the cycle. We're going to talk about how to break that cycle today. So sleep is kind of like a cure-all for a lot of things, right? It's like the aspirin of body functions. So getting your sleep right is going to be a huge benefit to you to start to feel better and get yourself out of burnout. Sleep deprivation also erodes your metabolism, right? And this is the mechanism where it allows people to gain weight. Because as your metabolism gets eroded, your body's not restoring itself. It's not able to repair itself. It's not able to make energy in the same way. Your metabolism is just going to keep dropping. As your metabolism drops, that means you're burning fewer and fewer calories during your waking hours as well. And that's going to make it a lot easier for you to gain weight over time. So what do we do? What do you do when you're struggling to sleep? You have to categorize, like, what's my sleep struggle? Is it that I just don't have enough time? I can sleep, I can fall asleep, I can stay asleep. The problem is I don't have enough time because my day takes over and next thing I know it's midnight and I got to get up at 6. And that's a specific issue, right? That's a specific thing to identify to say, I don't have a sleep issue per se, except that I have a time constraint. So for that, what we ask you to do is to figure out what temporarily can I carve out of my day that will allow me to get more sleep. Now, how much sleep you need, again, depends on your dynamic metabolic type as well as your biological sex. So if you are an excess dynamic metabolic type, if you go through our burnout assessment and you are categorized as having an excess dynamic metabolic type, whether it's hot excess, cold excess, or temperature neutral excess, if you're a biological female and an excess dynamic metabolic type, you need 8 hours of sleep. If you are a biological male and you're an excess dynamic metabolic type, you need 7 hours of sleep. So women need that extra hour because, again, of our biology and how that kind of clashes with our modern lifestyles. So I encourage you to go back and watch the podcast on why women have to work harder to stay healthy, to go into a deeper dive as to why we need that extra hour as biological women. Now, these numbers come from traditional Chinese medicine theory, and we have a lot of science now to back up how much sleep that we actually need. If you are a deficient dynamic metabolic type and you're a biological female, you actually need 9 hours of sleep. So you need an extra hour over and above the biological female that's an excess dynamic metabolic type because you're deficient. So that means you need extra time for your body to restore and assimilate and repair itself so that you raise your metabolism out of that deficiency state. So you need actually 9 hours if you're a biological female. If you're a biological male and you had a deficient dynamic metabolic type, again, hot, cold, or temperature neutral, you need 8 hours of sleep. Again, because you're deficient, you need an extra hour more than the biological male who had an excess dynamic metabolic type because you're deficient. You're missing things that your metabolism requires to meet its demands. And so you have to stay in that parasympathetic sleep state an extra hour so that your body can assimilate nutrients, repair itself, build its metabolism, do all the things that it can't do during the day. When we're running around during the day, even if it's a desktop job and we're sitting at our desks, there's so much energy that we're blowing through just to think and to think through the processes of moving through our day and all the things we need to do. We don't repair ourselves when we're doing that. We only repair ourselves when we're laying flat, asleep. This is why sleep is so essential. We can't make up for it during the day when we're actually awake. So we have to build that time in and find a way. So of course, there's only 24 hours in a day, right? So if you're the biological female who has a deficient dynamic metabolic type, that means you need to wrap it up by the 15th hour, right? And spend those 9 hours subsequently sleeping. So that's 15 hours out of your day, right? 8 of them are probably spent potentially working, right? Now, and if you're a stay-at-home mom, that's actually even more challenging, right? Because you don't have work hours. You don't get to leave and turn everything off, right? You're a mom 24/7. So that's where boundaries are really important and setting realistic but important healthy boundaries for yourself so that you're engaging your kids perhaps in understanding that mom needs extra sleep, right? And engaging them in activities that will allow you to get to bed earlier, for example. Now, of course, I'm a mom too, and so I remember when my kids used to not feel well, right? They caught a cold or they got a little bug and they were up all night. So I was up all night, right? And, obviously you're not going to be able to necessarily prevent that from happening. And so, that aside, of course, but on a regular day, you want to make sure that you're planning that sleep time. Because if you're just waiting until everything's done for the day and then that's when you're thinking of going to sleep, you will never, ever go to bed on time. So you have to have a target time that you want to go to bed and have that sleep hygiene regimen to do that. And some of that is engaging your kids in sleep time activities, right? So that they're winding down so that you can wind down. But you have to pick that time, right? So you have to kind of work backwards from what time do I have to wake up in the morning? If the answer is 6 a.m., that means that you have to be winding down by 9 p.m. and pretty much like asleep so that you get literally those 9 hours of sleep that you need. Now, again, that's not forever, right? That's until the burnout is resolved. Generally speaking, when you're not in a burnout state and you're not exhausted, if you're a biological female, you need 8 hours of sleep. So the reason for the extra sleep is because you're in a burnout state that is a deficient burnout state. You're missing things that are really critical for your metabolism to meet the demands. So it's not forever that you need 9 hours of sleep. It's just until the burnout is resolved. And you can resolve burnout in a reasonably short period of time if you know what to do. So knowing your dynamic metabolic type is a huge piece of that. Because if you don't buy that extra hour and incorporate it into your sleep habits, you will never get out of burnout. It is really hard to get out of burnout when you're not sleeping enough. And so you just keep going around in circles and not quite ever getting where you want to go. And so protecting those 9 hours of sleep is like gold if you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type female. Now I have people say, do I have to actually be asleep for all those 9 hours? The answer is mostly you want to be at least in a resting state where you're not still moving around and still mind racing and planning out the next day. And so you really want to be quiescent, right? And you want to take that time to become still within yourself. And so that's where breath work is really important. And perhaps meditation, if that really helps you as well. Meditation has been shown to help improve sleep quality. And deep breathing with the quick coherence technique has also been shown to improve sleep quality. So if you're winding down and you're doing your breath work and you're spending a few minutes doing that, or you're spending a little bit of time meditating, that's okay because meditation has sleep-like effects. But yeah, if you have to get up at 6, you got to be in bed like winding down by 9. I know that sounds crazy. You're like, who goes to bed at 9 o'clock anymore? But if you don't do that, you will not get out of burnout. That's if you have to get up at 6, right? So if you get up at 8, then you want to be in bed by 11, right? So you're still getting those 9 hours of sleep. So it depends on when you have to get up. And again, if you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type biological male, again, you count backwards by 8 hours, right? So again, if you have to get up at 7, you want to make sure you're in bed by 11, right? So you get those 8 hours of sleep. Same thing for the excess dynamic metabolic type. So if you are the biological female and you have an excess dynamic metabolic type, you need 8 hours of sleep. So you just work it back from when you have to get up. Same thing with the biological male who's the excess. You need 7 hours. So you get to be in bed less than the rest of us. So again, just count back 7 hours, and that's when you should be winding down and going to sleep. So what are some of the things that we can do to put ourselves in the mindset of being ready to go to sleep? One of them is planning. So, all right, I want to be in bed by 11 because I have to get up at 7 and I need 8 hours of sleep. So, what does the hour before 11 look like for you? And that's really important. And even the 2 hours before 11 are actually pretty important. You want to make sure that you're winding down the bright lighting that's coming into your eyes. One of the reasons people struggle to go to sleep is because of blue light coming into their eyes. Blue light is like the light coming from the sun. The sun is our main alarm clock to tell us it's time to get up. So the sun shines even through our closed eyes and starts to wake us up. So as soon as we get exposed to that sunlight, our cortisol starts to come up and we get our morning cortisol spike. So if that is being simulated by artificial lighting at night, that same mechanism is taking place where I want to go to bed, but my cortisol is high because I have all this artificial sunlight coming into my eyes. So some of those are your phone screens, your television set, the overhead lights in most people's homes, computer screens, and all of that. They all have blue light coming at you. It's not just setting your device to have a blue light filter, but actually making sure you have one over your eyes. So I recommend not just that you set your not just that you set your phone and your computer and even your smart TV to have the blue light filter on at dusk, but to get actual blue light blockers that you just put right in front of your eyes. So glasses, if you already wear glasses for vision, you get the ones that clip on. The general recommendation is at least 2 hours before you're going to go to bed that you're not getting that blue light into your eyes. So if you're wearing blue light blockers, what I recommend to most people is when the sun is going down, you put your glasses on. And when the sun, obviously when you're going to sleep, you take your glasses off. And then the sun comes up in the morning and you know it's time to get up. So that's usually my recommendation. But at least for the 2 hours before you're planning to go to bed, make sure you don't have any blue light coming into your eyes. The best way to do that is with blue light blockers. So if you have trouble falling asleep, that's one quick remedy for that. Another easy trick, believe it or not, is the foods that you eat. There are certain foods that you can eat that have the amino acid tryptophan in it. Tryptophan is the precursor to serotonin and melatonin. Melatonin helps you go to sleep. Melatonin is the anti-cortisol. If your cortisol is too high at night, you can't make the melatonin because it suppresses that. Cortisol will suppress your ability to make your melatonin. So again, you want to make sure that you're going into this parasympathetic, relaxed state at night. You're not getting the light stimulation. You're not doing too much in terms of activity. You're winding down to get yourself into that sleep mode. Eating foods that contain tryptophan will help you make the serotonin that helps you make the melatonin, which helps you go to sleep. Melatonin regulates the sleep and wake cycle. The sleep and wake cycle is also regulated by the microbiome in the gut. So it's the gut that actually regulates the sleep and wake cycle. So it makes sense that food helps us to sleep better. Now, what foods contain tryptophan? Those are certain nuts, almonds, cashews, walnuts, peanuts too, but be careful with peanuts. They're highly allergenic and can contain mold. So peanuts you may not want to go too overboard on, but there are several other types of nuts that contain tryptophan. And certain types of dairy. And again, some people are sensitive to dairy, so don't force yourself to have things that you know you're going to have negative reactions to. But certain types of cheese will have tryptophan. Yogurt contains tryptophan, and certain seeds like chia seeds, pumpkin seeds also contain tryptophan, as well as tofu and soy products. Turkey has a lot of tryptophan in it. That's why we all pass out after Thanksgiving dinner, right? It's the tryptophan in the turkey that does that. So what studies show is if you pair those tryptophan containing foods with a little bit of complex carb, not a lot because you're going to bed, so you're not going to really burn those carbs. So you don't want to have a lot of carbs, just a little tiny bit. That actually helps you sleep better, helps you fall asleep because it increases the melatonin that then tells your body it's time to go to bed and puts you in that more relaxed state so that you can fall asleep. High protein diets have also been shown to help people sleep better. So again, in previous podcasts, we talked about how the recommendations for protein were woefully inadequate for decades and how the recommended daily allowance it can be up to only a third of what people actually require. And so knowing your protein requirements according to the latest studies is really important so that you're eating enough protein. Again, 50% of your dry body weight is protein. So that means just about everything in your body is made out of protein. So again, your hormones, your enzymes, your cell walls, your hair, your nails, even the neurotransmitters are made from amino acids. And so protein is so important. So making sure you're meeting your daily requirements is really important. It's okay if you exceed your daily requirements. There is no real risk to having more protein than you need, as long as those protein sources, again, are clean. So unfortunately, we have wreaked havoc with our protein sources. So make sure that as you're eating your protein sources, that you're getting them from a trusted source. Look for organic protein as much as you possibly can, cage-free, pasture-raised, wild-caught fish, not genetically modified. All of these things are extremely important to make sure that the protein that you're putting into your body is healthy. Avoiding super heavy meals at night is really important as well. So again, this is one of the reasons I don't love intermittent fasting because it forces people to eat later in the day and that bogs down the body so it can't really quite so it can't really perform the functions that it would be normally performing because it's busy trying to digest and absorb food when it's not really supposed to be doing that. So avoiding heavy, greasy meals at night is really important. Avoiding caffeine beyond 2 p.m. or so is important. Caffeine is a stimulant. It's going to keep you up. It's going to raise your cortisol and make it really hard for you to go to sleep, even if you're going to sleep 8, 9, 10 hours later. So making sure if you like drinking your caffeinated beverages that you're having them very early in the day and you're having more decaffeinated beverages after 2 p.m. And then having foods that are rich in magnesium. Magnesium helps the body to get calm, tends to stimulate more of the calm side of the nervous system, that parasympathetic side, which is where we need to be in order to properly fall asleep. So green leafy veggies, bananas contain a lot of magnesium. So these are some of the foods you can incorporate into your diet to help you fall asleep. The other really critically important thing to know is when to go to sleep, right? So as we're counting backwards from the time that we need to wake up in the morning, another really important thing to remember is our body makes melatonin during certain times of the night. And so if we miss that window when the body is making that melatonin and we're not asleep during that time, we kind of miss the boat. So it's really important to be winding down somewhere between 9 and 11 p.m. because that's when the melatonin is starting to ramp up. Melatonin starts to peak around 11 o'clock. Now, you still make melatonin for several more hours, but it's not peaked. It's not at its prime. So if you go to bed at like midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, you've totally missed that train, and that's going to disrupt your sleep. The other tip is to make sure your room is super dark. Get blackout curtains, whatever you need to do to make it really dark. Don't use night lights to the best of your ability. Having that extra light stimulating you, even when your eyes are closed, like that light still gets through your skin, the skin of your eyelids. And so make sure your room is dark. Also make sure your room is cool. If your body is too warm, you're going to be restless while you're sleeping and you're going to be more prone to waking up. And so making sure your room is like 70 degrees or so is actually really important. So especially in the summer, or if you live in warmer climates, make sure that you have your air conditioning going so that your room temperature is somewhere between 68, 70 degrees or so. Now, everybody's a little bit different, right? So some people might find that too cold, right? If you're a cold dynamic metabolic type, you may not like 70 degrees, right? You may need it at 72. If you're a hot dynamic metabolic type, you may want it even colder than that. You may be the one that wants it at 68. And that's okay. You can play with it. These aren't strict requirements that you have to meet, right? So listen to your dynamic metabolic type and adjust accordingly, but it's got to be a temperature that you perceive to be cool enough that you're not waking up. or having trouble falling asleep because the body is just a little bit too stimulated by the heat. When things are warm, they move around more. When things are cool, they slow down and settle, right? This is why you need the room to be cool. And these are all science-backed. We have a lot of data, a lot of medical data, a lot of scientific evidence coming out to tell us that these are really important things that we need to have in place to get proper sleep. And to show just how important sleep is, there was a study done in 2021 that showed that sleep deprivation is directly related to mood disorders and burnout in younger adults. So the data is clear, and there's a lot more evidence, a lot more studies coming out to show the same things. So making sure you get enough sleep is super, super important. So sleep is not negotiable, right? Getting the right amount of sleep is a non-negotiable requirement to get yourself out. So do whatever it is that you need to do to make sure that you get the right amount of sleep for your dynamic metabolic type. Figure out if there's something I can cut out of the day. Is there something I can delegate that someone else can do so that I don't have to do it, so I'm not butting up against this time crunch where I'm not getting enough sleep. So look for things you can delete, look for things you can delegate so that you're not staying up too late and not getting that sleep that you need. Now, if you're used to going to bed like super late, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to automatically be able to fall asleep at 9 o'clock. So the best strategy is to very slowly sleep a little bit earlier and then a little bit earlier by 15-minute increments until you get down to the time that's maximal for you to be asleep. So if you're that deficient dynamic metabolic type biological female who needs 9 hours and you have to get up at 6, so you have to be winding down by 9, but you typically go to bed at midnight, you can't just go to bed at 9. It's not going to work. You're going to lay there awake, right? So if you're used to going to bed at midnight, you might want to set it so that you go to bed at 11:45, right? And then a week later, you go to bed at 11:30. Then a week later, you go to bed at 11:15. And you just slowly wind it back so that your body can acclimate. And you're doing all the things that we talked about, right? The tryptophan containing foods. The room is dark. The room is cool. You've got your blue light blockers on. You're doing your breath work, all the things that are going to make it easier and easier for you to fall asleep at those times. And then you just slowly wind yourself down until you're at the time that's most beneficial for you to go to bed. And that might take a while, and that's okay. The point is, every extra 15 minutes you get, that's an extra 15 minutes your body gets to do something it wasn't able to do the night before. So you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be moving the needle in the right direction. Naps too. If you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type, naps are your best friend, right? So the best time to nap is in the middle of the afternoon, if you can. So if you have your lunch break, you can mindfully eat for 10 or 15 minutes and then lay down. If you just ate, obviously don't lay flat on your back. You might have to put a little wedge pillow so you're not fully flat, but lay down, set your alarm, and just close your eyes for 10 minutes. Put your feet up above your heart. That's actually really important. What happens when you put your feet up above your heart is you send all the blood back to your core that were pooled in your extremities all day, or all morning, I should say. And so you get to actually reoxygenate that blood and send it back out into the tissues. Oxygen is huge for recovery. It's huge for burnout recovery. So getting more oxygen, doing that breath work, when you're flooding your body with more oxygen, your body then will be able to use that oxygen to make a lot more energy. Your body makes a lot more energy when there's more oxygen in its cells than when there's less oxygen in its cells. And it sounds weird to think of, what do you mean I don't have oxygen in my cells? I would be pale and purple and my pulse ox would be low. The pulse ox doesn't show you what's going on deep in your tissues where the burnout is actually occurring. The pulse ox just shows you what's circulating in your main circulatory system, and your body knows better than to allow there not to be enough oxygen in your main circulatory system. However, if you're shallow breathing or you're stressed out, there are pockets of your body deep inside the tissues where the pulse ox can't measure, where you're not getting enough oxygen, and that's a massive cause of diseases. Lack of oxygen in our tissues is a thing, right? We understand that. That's where the DNA gets damaged. That's where the genes get damaged. That's where the cancers can form. Cancer loves lack of oxygen. That's where it thrives. And so where cancers form is usually where there's oxygen deprivation. So when you start taking deeper breaths and you're driving air down to the base of your lungs with a very slow 5-second inhale, what you're actually doing is you're flooding your body with oxygen. Because the base of the lungs is much wider than the tops of the lungs, the first half of the lung is more narrow than the bottom half of your lungs. And that's on purpose. Your lungs are designed that way because we don't use oxygen when we're in fight or flight. So when you're shallow breathing, your body is interpreting that as a fight or flight response. It's not going to use oxygen under those circumstances. And so if you keep shallow breathing for extended periods of time, there are pockets in your body of tissues that will not be properly oxygenated. When they're not properly oxygenated, they're not able to make as much energy. When they're not able to make as much energy, they can't support your metabolism, and that's what burnout actually is. So when you're sleeping, your body gets to correct all that if you're getting enough sleep. So doing your heart math breathing during the day is really critical to set you up for your body to use all that oxygen and use all that extra energy to repair itself and get you out of burnout. And what that does is it doesn't just get you out of burnout, it's actually preventing diseases. So it can also get you out of your depression and anxiety. It can also get you out of even poor blood sugar management. They've studied heart math and shown that it's actually quite beneficial for regulating blood sugar as well. It's also been studied for insomnia, and it's been shown to help people sleep better. Because when you take a deep breath, what you're doing is you're triggering the calm side of your body. You're stimulating your vagus nerve when you stretch those lungs out more. That vagus nerve is part of the sympathetic nervous system. And so it creates it's part of the parasympathetic nervous system. And it creates that calm tone that settles your body into sleep patterns and settles your body to do all of the functions it would do at night. So it's like you're putting money in the bank, so to speak, when you're doing your heart math 3 times a day, so that that energy, that money is there while you're sleeping, so your body can then exchange and pay for the body functions it needs to do. So this is why heart math in 30 years of study has been shown to be so helpful for so many things, from weight loss to anxiety, depression, ADHD, and so much more, frankly. So if you couple doing your heart math exercise with when you're laying flat with your feet up, not only are you bringing blood back to your core, back to your heart, and your lungs to be reoxygenated, if you're doing your heart math breathing during that time, you're actually flooding that blood with oxygen. And now that blood is going to go back to where it came from and oxygenate those tissues, that were getting deprived by your shallow breathing. And so these are all the tips and tricks that without any medication, without any supplements, you can actually tremendously improve the quality of your sleep, get yourself out of burnout, and even prevent diseases potentially. Now, of course, you have to eat right and exercise. And so you want to make sure you're not ignoring everything else and just working on your sleep, right? So you want a balanced lifestyle so you can do that. But sleep is such a cornerstone. And so I hope you found tips and tricks today to be useful. Let me know how it works out. Let me know the wins, the aha moments that you have. Try it out. Let me know how it works. Come back to the podcast and drop the comments here and let me know how it improved your sleep. We just are in the middle now of our 7-day burnout resolution challenge, and we're already getting amazing results from people just from doing their breath work, sleeping through the night better. And that was even before we talked about the sleep pillar in our 7-day challenge. And so many things fall into place just from breathing properly, getting sleep. There's so much that can be done without having to do a bunch of complicated tests, taking medications, taking supplements. So these are just some easy tips and tricks that you can apply. Now, if you're struggling, right, if you do all these things and you're still struggling, make sure that you see your physician. Make sure you might need a sleep study. You might need a workup, blood work, other tests to make sure that there aren't underlying conditions that are preventing you from sleeping. And even still, you can still apply these methods even as you're treating an underlying condition, because it will help you to support that condition better and prevent it from worsening. So that's all the time we have for today's podcast. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. If you haven't yet taken our burnout assessment, please go to awakenwellnessnow.com. Take our burnout assessment today to find out your dynamic metabolic type so you know how to apply the sleep pillar and how many hours of sleep you need to get yourself out of burnout. If you want to know about our Wellness Warrior 9-week transformation program, go to our website. We have a free training to give you more insight about that program. You can book a call to speak with me to see if our 9-week transformation program would be a great fit for you to help you resolve burnout. If you want to know about our corporate programs, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to share our corporate burnout risk assessment tool with you. And until next time, many blessings. Thank you for listening and watching.